The holding cell on station reeked of fear and desperation. Commander Sarah pressed her back against the cold metal wall, watching the parade of alien spectators shuffle past her transparent cage. Their eyes glowed with hunger and anticipation, chattering in languages that scraped against her ears like broken glass. "Look at this one," hissed a serpentine, its forked tongue tasting the air near the barrier. "So small, so fragile, the Hive Queen will tear it apart in seconds." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her jaw clenched. 3 months ago, she had been captain of the UES Defiance, leading humanity's first deep space exploration mission beyond the Outer Rim. Now she was entertainment for the galaxy's most bloodthirsty criminals. The capture had been swift and brutal. Pirates had ambushed her ship near the nebula, overwhelming her crew with superior numbers and technology. Most of her people were dead now, scattered across the void or sold into slavery. Only she remained, deemed too valuable for a quick death. "The human will last perhaps 30 seconds, chuckled a hulking warrior, its 4 arms crossed over a barrel chest. "I have seen the Hive Queen fight. She crushed a battle champion like an insect." Sarah's fingers found the small scar on her left wrist, a reminder of the neural implant the pirates had forcibly installed. The device would broadcast every moment of her upcoming fight to paying customers across 12-star systems. Her death would be profitable entertainment. The crowd parted as Warlord approached her cell. The draconian crime lord stood 9 feet tall, his scaled hide marked with ritual scars that spoke of countless victories. His reputation preceded him across the outer territories, ruthless, intelligent, and utterly without mercy. "Human," he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "Tomorrow you face the Hive Queen in the arena. She has never been defeated. 67 challengers have fallen before her claws." Sarah met his burning yellow gaze without flinching. "Then she's overdue for a loss." The aliens around erupted in laughter, a cacophony of growls, clicks, and shrieks. But something flickered behind the warlord's eyes, perhaps respect, or maybe just surprise that his prey still had spirit. "You humans are amusing," continued. "Your species has been in space for what, barely a century? You know nothing of real combat, real strength. You hide behind your technology and call yourselves warriors." "We call ourselves survivors," Sarah replied evenly. "There's a difference." Lips pulled back, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "Survive tomorrow, human, and perhaps we will speak again." As the crowd dispersed, Sarah was left alone with her thoughts and the constant hum of the station's life support systems. Through the small viewport in her cell, she could see the arena being prepared in the central hub. Massive energy barriers would contain the violence, while thousands of spectators would bay for blood from the safety of their viewing boxes. The Hive Queen's reputation was legendary even among humans. A bioengineered horror created by the fallen empire, she stood 12 feet tall and possessed strength that could crush starship hull plating. Her chitinous exoskeleton deflected energy weapons, and her 4 scythe-like arms had carved through armies. When the fell, she had been sold to the fighting pits, where she had reigned supreme for 15 years. Sarah closed her eyes and began her preparation ritual, something she had learned during her years in Earth's Special Forces before joining the Exploration Corps. She focused on her breathing, slowing her heart rate and centering her mind. Fear was natural, but it could not be allowed to control her actions. The memories came unbidden. Her father's farm in Montana, the smell of wheat fields in summer, her mother's laughter echoing across the porch. She remembered her first day at the Space Force Academy, the pride in her parents' eyes when she received her commission. She thought of her crew, good people who had trusted her leadership and paid the ultimate price for humanity's reach toward the stars. "They think they know what humans are capable of," she whispered to herself. "They're about to learn." Hours passed in meditation and planning. Sarah had studied every available recording of the Hive Queen's fights, analyzing patterns and weaknesses. The creature was powerful but relied heavily on brute force and intimidation. Her movements followed predictable patterns, especially when she grew overconfident. As the station's artificial night cycle began, a guard approached her cell. The jailer was typical of his species, militaristic, efficient, and utterly loyal to whoever paid his wages. "Food," he grunted, sliding a tray through the meal slot. Sarah examined the gray protein paste and nutrient cubes. Standard prison fare, designed to keep her alive but not strong. She ate methodically, knowing she would need every calorie for what lay ahead. "Guard," she called out as he turned to leave. The paused, his features expressionless. "Tell me about the Hive Queen. What's her real name?" "She has no name," the guard replied. "Names are for beings with souls. She is a weapon, nothing more." "Everything has a name," Sarah insisted. "What did her creators call her?" The guard's antennae twitched, a sign of discomfort among his kind. "They called her, it means beautiful death in their tongue." "And what happened to the dead? Their empire fell when they created too many monsters to control." The guard's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "The galaxy is better without them." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. This downfall was well documented in human archives, a cautionary tale about the dangers of bioengineering sentient weapons. But if it was truly sentient, that changed everything. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sarah performed stretching exercises in the confined space, keeping her muscles loose and ready. She reviewed everything she knew about Hive Queen biology, searching for any advantage she could exploit. Dawn came artificially to the station as the lighting systems cycled through their programmed routine. Sarah could hear the growing excitement in the corridors beyond her cell as spectators began arriving for the day's entertainment. Betting pools would already be active, with odds heavily favoring the Hive Queen. "Time to go, human," announced a new guard. This one a hulking with cybernetic enhancements covering half his skull. Sarah stood slowly, rolling her shoulders to work out the stiffness from sleeping on the hard cell floor. "I'm ready." The guard attached neural dampener shackles to her wrists, devices that would prevent her from accessing any potential psychic abilities. Not that humans possessed such powers, but the precaution was standard for all arena combatants. "Move," the commanded, prodding her with an electrostaff. They walked through corridors lined with cheering aliens, all eager to catch a glimpse of the day's sacrifice. Sarah kept her head high and her expression calm, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing fear in her eyes. The preparation chamber beneath the arena was stark and functional. Weapon racks lined the walls, containing everything from primitive clubs to advanced energy weapons. But Sarah knew the rules. Combatants could only use what they brought with them or what they could take from their opponent. "Choose your weapon, human," said the arena master, with ceremonial tattoos covering his scaled hide. Sarah surveyed the available options, finally selecting a simple rod about 3 feet in length. It was crude compared to the high-tech weapons surrounding it, but she understood its capabilities. "That's all," the arena master's forked tongue flickered with amusement. "The Hive Queen will snap that like a twig." "Maybe," Sarah replied, testing the rod's weight and balance. "Or maybe she'll underestimate what humans can do with simple tools." The roar of the crowd above grew deafening as the opening ceremonies began. Holographic displays would be showing highlights from the Hive Queen's previous victories, building anticipation for the slaughter to come. "You have 15 minutes to make peace with whatever gods you worship," the arena master informed her. "Then the floor rises and your entertainment value begins." Sarah sat cross-legged on the cold floor, holding her chosen weapon across her knees. She thought of her crew again, their faces clear in her mind. Tom Martinez, her first officer, who had died trying to save the navigation computer. Dr. Elizabeth Shaw there, who had taken a plasma bolt to the chest while tending wounded. Chief engineer, who had held the engine room alone against 6 boarders before falling. They had been explorers, scientists, diplomats hopping to forge peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Instead, they had found a galaxy where strength was the only currency that mattered, where the weak existed only to serve or entertain the strong. "But we're not weak," Sarah murmured, her grip tightening on the metal rod. "We've survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and worse. We've clawed our way from caves to the stars through pure determination. They think they know what humans are capable of." The floor beneath her began to vibrate as massive hydraulic systems prepared to lift the arena platform. Somewhere above, the Hive Queen would be making her own preparations, perhaps sharpening her claws or reviewing footage of her previous victories. Sarah stood and moved to the center of the platform, directly beneath the opening that would soon reveal her to the bloodthirsty crowd. The neural implant in her wrist pulsed steadily, broadcasting her biometric data to betting pools across the galaxy. Her heart rate was steady, adrenaline levels normal, disappointing those who had wagered on her collapsing from fear. The platform lurched upward with a grinding mechanical roar. Light flooded down from above as the arena floor sealed beneath her, cutting off any possibility of retreat. The crowd's roar was deafening, a wall of sound that seemed to press against her from all sides. Sarah emerged into the arena proper, a circular space 200 meters across with 50-meter walls topped by energy barriers. Viewing boxes stretched up into the shadows above, packed with thousands of alien spectators representing dozens of species. Holographic displays floated throughout the arena, showing close-ups of her face and vital signs. On the opposite side of the arena, another platform was rising. The Hive Queen emerged like a nightmare from the depths, her chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh arena lights. 12 feet of bioengineered death, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws that could slice through armor plating. Her compound eyes fixed on Sarah with predatory intelligence. "Ladies and assorted beings," boomed the announcer's voice through the arena's sound system. "Welcome to today's main event. In the red corner, weighing in at 870 pounds, undefeated in 67 matches, the terror of the pits, the Hive Queen." The crowd erupted in appreciation for their champion, raised her arms in acknowledgement, her claws catching the light like polished blades. "And in the blue corner," the announcer continued with barely concealed amusement, "weighing in at 140 pounds, from the primitive world of Earth, a human female with the audacious name of Commander Sarah." Scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. Sarah could see credits changing hands as final bets were placed. The odds board floating above the arena showed her chances at approximately 3,000 to 1 against. The two combatants faced each other across the arena floor. Moved with fluid grace despite her size, her 4 legs carrying her in a slow circle as she studied her opponent. Her mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. "Another soft skin comes to feed my legend," spoke, her voice a layered harmony of clicks and whistles translated by the arena systems. "Tell me, little mammal, shall I make your death quick or entertaining?" Sarah adjusted her grip on the metal rod, her eyes never leaving the Hive Queen's movements. "How about you just try not to embarrass yourself when I'm done with you?" The crowd fell silent at her words, even paused in her circling, compound eyes reflecting surprise. No challenger had ever spoken to her with such casual confidence. "The human has spirit," laughed a voice from the VIP section. "This may be more entertaining than expected." Sarah ignored the commentary, focusing entirely on her opponent. Was moving differently now, her casual confidence replaced by something approaching caution. Good. Uncertainty would be her first weapon. The countdown timer appeared in holographic numbers above the arena, 10 seconds until the match began officially. Sarah's breathing remained steady, her mind clear and focused. She thought of her father's words from long ago. "When facing something bigger and stronger than you, remember that size means nothing if you can't hit your target." 5 seconds. Claws extended fully, each one the length of a combat knife. The crowd held its collective breath. 3 seconds. Sarah shifted her stance slightly, weight balanced on the balls of her feet. 2 seconds. The Hive Queen's muscles coiled like loaded springs. 1 second. Sarah smiled. The arena erupted in chaos as the timer reached 0, and 2 beings from different worlds prepared to discover what it truly meant to fight for survival. But this was no longer about entertainment or profit. This had become something far more dangerous for everyone involved. The moment the timer hit 0, launched herself forward with terrifying speed. 400 kilograms of bioengineered death hurtled across the arena floor, claws extended, and mandibles spread wide in a primal roar that shook the walls. Sarah didn't move. The crowd gasped as the human female stood perfectly still, the metal rod held loosely at her side. Betting pools fluctuated wildly as spectators assumed she had frozen in terror. Even seemed momentarily confused by the lack of response, her compound eyes searching for signs of movement or defensive positioning. At the last possible second, Sarah dropped to one knee and rolled left. Its massive form thundered past, her claws raking empty air where the human had stood moments before. The Hive Queen's momentum carried her into the arena wall with a resounding crash that sent vibrations through the entire structure. Sarah completed her roll and came up running, the metal rod now gripped in both hands like a spear. Before could recover from her impact with the wall, Sarah struck with surgical precision. The rod found the gap between chitinous plates at the base of the creature's left rear leg, sliding deep into the joint mechanism. shrieked in surprise and pain as sparks flew from her bioengineered nervous system. The leg locked up immediately, forcing her to compensate with an awkward three-legged stance. Dark green fluid, the equivalent of blood, began seeping from the wound. "Impossible," shouted someone from the VIP boxes. "Nothing gets past her armor." But Sarah was already moving again, withdrawing the rod and dancing backward as spun to face her with fury blazing in her compound eyes. The human's first strike had been calculated, targeting not the heavily armored torso, but the relatively vulnerable joint systems that kept the creature mobile. "You dare," hissed her translator, struggling to convey the depth of her rage. "I am perfection incarnate. I am death given form." Sarah circled slowly, keeping her distance while studying her opponent's modified movement patterns. The damaged leg was affecting balance more than expected. Apparently, the engineers had prioritized raw power over redundant mobility systems. "You're a weapon that's forgotten what war really means," Sarah replied, adjusting her grip on the bloodied rod. "You've been playing games in this arena for so long you think combat is about intimidation and brute force." The crowd was on its feet now, their bloodthirsty cheers replaced by stunned silence. This wasn't how arena matches were supposed to go. The human should have been torn apart by now, her remains scattered across the fighting floor for the cleanup crews to collect. Tested her weight on the damaged leg, mandibles clicking with frustration. "You think one lucky strike changes anything? I have redundant systems, backup neural pathways. I am built for war." "Built for war by people who lost their war," Sarah observed, continuing her careful circle. "Tell me, when was the last time you fought someone who actually fought back?" The use of her birth name stopped the Hive Queen cold. For 15 years in the arena, she had been simply the Hive Queen, a title that reduced her to mere spectacle. Only her creators had known her true designation. "How do you know that name?" demanded, her forearms weaving defensive patterns. "Because I did my homework," Sarah replied. "The guard mentioned it. You were designation bioengineered battlefield commander of the 3rd Legion. You weren't just built for killing, you were built for thinking." In the VIP boxes, Warlord leaned forward with interest. The human was doing something no previous challenger had attempted. She was having a conversation with the Hive Queen during combat. Most fighters were too terrified or too focused on survival to attempt psychological warfare. His movements became more cautious, her predatory confidence shaken by the human's unexpected knowledge. "They are dead. That designation means nothing now." "It means you remember what you were before this place turned you into entertainment," Sarah pressed, noting how the creature's posture had shifted from aggressive to defensive. "How many of your opponents have you actually respected? How many fights have challenged your intellect rather than just your strength?" The question hit home. Sarah could see it in the subtle changes to his body language, the slight drooping of her secondary arms, the barely perceptible shift in her stance. For years, the Hive Queen had been fighting prey animals, desperate creatures with no real hope of victory. She had forgotten what it felt like to face an opponent who saw her as something more than a monster. "You're trying to confuse me," said, but her voice lacked its earlier certainty. "I'm trying to remind you what you are," Sarah corrected. "They didn't create mindless killing machines. They created thinking weapons, soldiers who could adapt, improvise, overcome unexpected challenges." Lunged again, but her attack lacked the explosive confidence of her first charge. Sarah easily, using the creature's momentum to land another precise strike, this time targeting the neural cluster beneath's right arm. The rod penetrated just deep enough to disrupt motor function, causing the arm to spasm uncontrollably. "Stop analyzing," roared, swinging wildly with her remaining functional arms. "Stop thinking, just die." But her attacks were becoming increasingly erratic, driven by frustration rather than tactical thinking. Sarah flowed around the clumsy strikes like water, her years of combat training evident in every movement. She had fought in zero gravity, in hostile atmospheres, against enemies both human and alien. This was just another battlefield. "I can't stop thinking," Sarah replied, scoring another hit on his left shoulder joint. "That's what makes humans dangerous. We never stop adapting, never stop learning. You've been fighting the same way for 15 years because nobody challenged you to do better." The crowd was growing restless now, confused by the tactical nature of the fight. They had come expecting a quick, brutal execution. Instead, they were watching something that looked more like a military engagement, with the human dictating the pace and terms of combat. In one of the viewing boxes, a small group of human slaves pressed against the barrier, hardly daring to believe what they were seeing. One of them, a young engineer who had been captured 3 years earlier, whispered to her companions, "She's fighting like special forces. Look at her movement patterns. That's not civilian training." Sarah heard nothing but the sound of her own controlled breathing and the clicking of claws on the arena floor. She was entering the combat trance her instructors had taught her years ago, a state of heightened awareness where time seemed to slow and every detail became crystal clear. Was favoring her right side now, compensating for the damage to her left leg and shoulder. Her breathing was becoming labored, not from physical exertion, but from the strain of fighting while angry and confused. The bioengineered warrior was making the classic mistake of emotional combat. "You want to know what humans are really good at?" Sarah asked, feinting left before striking right. The rod found another gap in the chitinous armor, this time near the base of spine. "We're good at taking impossible situations and finding ways to win anyway." Stumbled, her nervous system overwhelmed by multiple damage points. For the first time since the fight began, she showed genuine uncertainty. "This cannot be happening. My armor is impenetrable. My strength is absolute." "Your armor has gaps," Sarah corrected, circling to stay behind the creature's damaged side. "Your strength means nothing if you can't hit your target, and your absolute confidence just became your biggest weakness." The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical damage. Had built her identity around being an unstoppable force of nature. Every victory had reinforced her belief in her own invincibility. Sarah wasn't just damaging her body, she was dismantling the mythology that had sustained her for 15 years. "Impossible," repeated, the word becoming a mantra of denial. I am beautiful death, I am." "You're a person," Sarah interrupted, her voice gentle despite the violence of their situation. "You're a thinking, feeling being who was created for war and then abandoned to become a gladiator. But that doesn't have to be who you are." For a moment, the arena fell completely silent. Even the crowd seemed to sense that something profound was happening beyond their understanding. Stood motionless, her compound eyes reflecting something that might have been recognition. Then the moment shattered as arena security moved into position around the upper levels. Warlord had apparently decided that the fight was becoming too unpredictable, too dangerous to the established order. Energy weapons were being trained on both combatants. "Doesn't want his champion to lose," Sarah observed, nodding the shifting positions of armed guards. "He's going to call this match and declare it a draw, then probably have us both killed to preserve the arena's reputation." Followed Sarah's gaze to the security teams above, her tactical programming finally reasserting itself. Years of arena fighting hadn't completely destroyed her military instincts. "You realize what this means?" asked, her voice taking on a different quality, less bestial, more thoughtful. "It means we're both being played," Sarah replied. "The crowd doesn't matter, the bets don't matter, we're just property to be disposed of when we stop being profitable." The energy weapons above them hummed to life, charging for what would appear to be a tragic accident. Two valuable fighters dying in an unexpected arena malfunction. The crowd would be compensated for their disappointment, new fighters would be found, and the profitable machine would continue grinding forward. "I have a proposal," Sarah said quickly, knowing they had only seconds before the execution order came down. "We stop fighting each other and start fighting them." His mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. "A warrior's proposal, but we are outnumbered 1,000 to 1. "Since when do humans worry about being outnumbered?" Sarah asked, raising her voice so the arena's audio systems would broadcast her words to every spectator. "We've been outnumbered since the day we left our home planet. We're outnumbered by every species in this galaxy. But we keep winning anyway because we refuse to accept that numbers determine outcome." The crowd stirred uneasily as her words echoed through the arena. In the viewing boxes, several alien dignitaries shifted nervously in their seats. The human was turning their entertainment into something else entirely, a political statement, a declaration of species capability. "Fire now," his voice boomed over the security channels, but was already moving, her forearms reaching for Sarah not to attack, but to lift. With a strength that belied her injuries, the Hive Queen hurled the human female toward the nearest guard position, following instantly with a leap that carried her chitinous bulk up the arena wall like a living missile. Sarah hit the energy barrier that separated the fighting floor from the spectator levels and somehow passed right through it. The guards had lowered the barriers for a clear shot, not expecting their targets to use that opening for escape. Chaos erupted throughout the arena as Sarah landed among a group of shocked security officers, her rod immediately finding vital points in their armor. Behind her, crashed into another guard position with the force of a falling meteor, her claws making quick work of anyone within reach. "Containment breach," someone screamed over the communication channels. "All units converge on Arena Level 7. But the arena's design worked against rapid response. The viewing levels were separated by security checkpoints and reinforced barriers designed to protect spectators from arena violence, not contain it when it spilled outward. Sarah had the advantage of surprise and superior individual capabilities against opponents who had never expected to face actual combat. "Human," called out as she finished with the last guard in her section. "Where do we go from here?" Sarah looked around quickly, her combat training automatically cataloging exits, weapon positions, and tactical advantages. They had perhaps 30 seconds before reinforcements arrived in force. The maintenance shafts of station were never designed for combat operations, but Sarah had learned long ago that military necessity trumped engineering intentions. She crawled through the narrow passage with practiced silence, following the thermal signature patterns she had memorized during her 3 months of careful observation. Behind her moved with surprising grace for a creature of her size. The Hive Queen's bioengineered anatomy allowed her to compress her form significantly, though the sound of her chitinous plates scraping against metal was impossible to completely eliminate. "The command center is through this section," Sarah whispered, consulting the station schematics she had pieced together from overheard conversations and glimpsed display screens. "Security hub first, then communications, then primary control." His mandibles clicked softly, a sign of acknowledgement she had developed during their escape from the arena levels. In the 30 minutes since their breakout, they had somehow developed an efficient communication system despite their completely different biologies and backgrounds. "Human," said quietly, "explain your strategy. In arena combat, victory comes through direct confrontation. This approach seems indirect." Sarah paused her crawling to look back at her unlikely ally. In the dim emergency lighting of the maintenance shaft, the Hive Queen looked less like a bioengineered killing machine and more like what she truly was, a soldier following orders from a superior officer. "Direct confrontation works when you have equal or superior force," Sarah explained patiently. "We have exactly 2 combatants against a station crew of approximately 8,000, plus whatever security forces keeps on standby. Going toe-to-toe with those numbers would be suicide." "Then how do we achieve victory?" Sarah smiled in the darkness. "We don't fight 8,000 individuals. We fight the systems that control 8,000 individuals. Take the station's command structure and the numbers become irrelevant." It was a distinctly human approach to warfare, asymmetric, technological, focused on leverage points rather than brute force confrontation. Sarah had learned it during the corporate wars of 2387, when human military units regularly defeated larger forces through superior tactics and technological exploitation. They reached the access panel leading to the security hub's ventilation system. Sarah could hear voices below, officers coordinating search teams throughout the station. Perfect. The entire security leadership would be in one location. "When I give the signal, drop through and secure the exits," Sarah instructed. "No killing unless absolutely necessary. We need prisoners for information, not bodies for burial." His compound eyes reflected understanding. Her training as a military commander was reasserting itself now that she had a tactical objective beyond simple survival. "Acknowledged. Non-lethal force unless threatened with deadly force." Sarah carefully removed the ventilation grating, testing each screw to avoid any noise that might alert the guards below. Through the opening, she could see 6 security officers clustered around a holographic display showing the station layout. Red markers indicated their search teams, while yellow zones marked areas that had been cleared. "They're being thorough," she observed. "But they're looking for 2 individuals hiding in corners, not 2 individuals preparing to take control of their command structure." The distinction was crucial. Every search protocol was designed around the assumption that escapees would try to find hiding places and wait for rescue or opportunity. No one expected them to go on the offensive immediately. Sarah dropped through the opening with fluid grace, landing silently behind the commander. Her rod, now worn smooth from use, found the pressure point at the base of his skull before he could react. He crumpled without a sound. Followed a heartbeat later, her 4 arms moving in perfect coordination to subdue the remaining 5 officers before they could reach their weapons. Her claws pressed against throats and vital arteries with surgical precision, enough pressure to ensure compliance, not enough to cause permanent damage. "Secure the door," Sarah ordered, moving to the security console. "I need 3 minutes to access their systems." The commander stirred as consciousness returned, his features twisting with confusion and fear. "Impossible. How did you escape the arena?" "The barriers were lowered by your own security teams," Sarah replied without looking up from the console. "Amazing how much easier things become when your enemies cooperate without realizing it." The security system was more sophisticated than she had expected, but still based on principles she understood. Every computer system, regardless of alien origin, required certain basic functions: input, processing, output, storage. The interfaces might look different, but the underlying logic remained consistent. "You cannot access our systems," the commander insisted. "The security protocols require biometric confirmation from authorized personnel." Sarah glanced at him with amusement. "You mean like this?" She pressed his unconscious hand to the scanner, which immediately chimed acceptance. "Thank you for your cooperation." Within minutes, Sarah had gained administrative access to the station's security network. Camera feeds from throughout station flickered across the multiple displays, showing search teams methodically clearing section after section. The futility of their search was almost amusing. "I need you to understand something," Sarah said as she began uploading new commands to the security system. "What happens next is going to seem impossible to everyone on this station. Humans have a reputation for pulling off impossible victories, but that reputation exists because we do things that other species consider unthinkable." "What are you planning?" asked, though her tone suggested she was beginning to suspect the scope of Sarah's intentions. "I'm going to broadcast a message to every screen, every speaker, every communication device on this station," Sarah replied. "I'm going to tell 8,000 aliens exactly what happens next, and then I'm going to make it happen." The implications hit immediately. "You're going to negotiate from a position of strength, but we hold only this one room." "We hold the station's nervous system," Sarah corrected. "From here, I can control life support, artificial gravity, internal transportation, external communications, and emergency protocols. This room doesn't just show what's happening throughout the station. It controls what happens throughout the station." Sarah's fingers flew across the alien interface as she accessed the general communication system. Every screen on station flickered once, then displayed her face with crystal clarity. Her voice would be translated automatically into dozens of languages for the diverse population of criminals, spectators, and workers. "Attention all inhabitants of station," she began, her voice carrying the tone of absolute authority she had learned during her years commanding deep space missions. "This is Commander Sarah of the United Earth Space Force. As of this moment, this station is under new management." Shocked silence greeted her announcement, followed immediately by panicked chatter as beings throughout the station tried to comprehend what they were hearing. "You are probably asking yourselves how one human female and one former arena combatant have gained control of your entire facility," Sarah continued. "The answer is simple. We stopped thinking like prisoners and started thinking like soldiers. We stopped reacting to your plans and started making plans of our own." In the background, she could hear security teams receiving frantic orders to retake the security hub. Sarah calmly entered a series of commands that locked down all internal transportation systems and sealed the security blast doors throughout the station's critical sections. "To the search teams currently trying to reach our position," she said, nodding their efforts on the security displays, "I have just locked you out of approximately 60% of the station. You no longer function. Your transport pods are disabled. Your communication with command authority has been severed." The demonstration was devastating in its simplicity. Across the station, security teams found themselves trapped in sealed compartments or unable to access critical areas. The very systems designed to protect the station from external threats had been turned against its defenders. To Warlord and his associates in the VIP levels, Sarah continued, you are no doubt formulating plans to regain control through brute force or negotiation. Allow me to save you some time. Neither approach will be successful. She paused for a moment, allowing the translation systems to catch up with her words in the dozens of languages spoken throughout the station. This is not a terrorist attack or a desperate escape attempt, Sarah explained. This is a military operation conducted by representatives of the human species against an enemy installation that has murdered human citizens and enslaved human personnel. You have declared war on humanity through your actions. We are simply responding in kind. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Sarah could see it in the expressions of the captured officers, in the panic spreading through the station's corridors, in the desperate attempts by various alien authorities to contact external military forces. To the human slaves currently held throughout this facility, she said, her voice taking on a warmer tone, help is coming. Stay where you are, remain calm, and prepare to assist in liberation operations as opportunities arise. In the viewing boxes of the arena, the remaining spectators watched in stunned disbelief as their entertainment became something far more serious. Several alien dignitaries were already demanding immediate evacuation, but the transportation lockdown made departure impossible. To the general population of workers, vendors, and other non-combatant personnel, Sarah continued, you are not our enemy unless you choose to become our enemy. Remain in your quarters or designated safe areas, and you will not be harmed. Listen to the broadcast with growing appreciation for human tactical thinking. This wasn't just a takeover. It was a psychological operation designed to fragment the station's population into manageable groups while neutralizing potential resistance before it could organize. To those who might be wondering about our long-term intentions, Sarah said, building toward her conclusion, let me be clear. This station will remain under human control until every human slave has been freed and transported to safety. We will negotiate the terms of surrender with appropriate authorities when they arrive. She paused again, this time for dramatic effect rather than translation needs. And to anyone still laboring under the delusion that humans are weak, primitive, or easily defeated, I offer this observation. We have been in space for less than 200 years. In that time, we have established colonies on 43 worlds, developed faster-than-light travel, and begun exploring the galaxy's outer reaches. We accomplished all of this while fighting wars among ourselves, surviving natural disasters, and overcoming obstacles that would have destroyed weaker species. The arena fell completely silent as her words echoed through the vast space. You brought us to this arena expecting to see a beast, Sarah concluded, her voice carrying across the station with absolute conviction. Instead, you got a woman with fire in her eyes and the determination to remind this galaxy why underestimating humans is always a fatal mistake. She ended the broadcast and turned to with a satisfied expression. Now we wait for their response. They'll try negotiation first, then threats, then probably a direct assault on our position. And then, asked. Sarah smiled, and for the first time since her capture, it was a genuinely happy expression. Then we show them what happens when humans stop playing defense and start playing offense. The counterattack came exactly as Sarah had predicted. Overwhelming force applied without finesse or tactical consideration. Warlord had committed every available security team to a simultaneous assault on the security hub, apparently believing that superior numbers would compensate for his complete loss of strategic initiative. Sarah watched the approaching forces on her displays with professional interest. 96 security personnel converging on their position from 7 different approaches, armed with heavy weapons and cutting equipment designed to breach the blast doors she had sealed throughout the station. Impressive response time, she observed to, who was monitoring the internal sensor networks. Terrible tactics, though. He's committing everything to a single objective without maintaining reserves or considering alternative objectives. His mandibles clicked in what Sarah had learned indicated amusement. You speak as though this pleases you. We are outnumbered 48-1. Exactly, Sarah replied, her fingers dancing across the control interface. That's 48 targets in known locations, moving along predictable routes, using equipment we can monitor through their own sensor networks. From a targeting perspective, this is ideal. The distinction was subtle but crucial. Had been thinking like an arena fighter, individual combat against multiple opponents where victory required personal skill and strength. Sarah was thinking like a military commander, systemic combat where victory required leverage, timing, and the effective use of available resources. Observe, Sarah said, activating a series of commands she had prepared while delivering her broadcast. Throughout the station, the environmental systems began cycling through emergency protocols. Artificial gravity fluctuated wildly in the corridors being used by security teams, causing heavily armed aliens to lose their footing and tumble into walls. Atmospheric pressure dropped just enough to trigger breathing difficulties without causing permanent damage. Lighting systems strobed in patterns designed to induce disorientation in most alien visual systems. Magnificent, breathed, watching the tactical displays as the coordinated assault devolved into chaos. You're using the station's own systems as weapons. They trained you to think tactically, Sarah replied, maintaining her careful manipulation of the environmental controls. Apply that training here, what do you see? Studied the displays with growing comprehension. They're trained for ship-to-ship combat and anti-piracy operations. They know how to fight external enemies, not internal system failures. Their protocols assume the station infrastructure will support their operations, not actively oppose them. Exactly. And more importantly, their command structure assumes centralized control through traditional hierarchies. When those hierarchies break down, they have no backup decision-making protocols. To demonstrate her point, Sarah activated the communication jamming systems, cutting off contact between the various security teams. Immediately, the coordinated assault fragmented as individual squad leaders began making independent decisions based on incomplete information. This is why humans are dangerous, Sarah explained, tracking the confused movements of the security teams. We don't just adapt to changing circumstances, we create changing circumstances for our enemies to adapt to. We turn their strengths into weaknesses and their advantages into disadvantages. The first breach attempt failed when the cutting equipment designed to slice through blast doors malfunctioned due to unexpected power fluctuations. The second failed when the team attempting it found themselves in a corridor filled with thick foam from the fire suppression systems. The third failed when artificial gravity reversed itself, sending the assault team tumbling toward the ceiling. Status report. Voice crackled over the security channels that Sarah had been monitoring. Teams 1 through 7 report equipment failures and environmental anomalies, replied a panicked officer. We're losing cohesion. Request permission to regroup and reassess. Negative, snarled. Continue the assault. It's 2 individuals against our entire security force. Sarah smiled as she listened to the increasingly frustrated exchange. He's making the classic mistake of assuming that numbers determine capability. That's the kind of thinking that cost their empire. She activated another series of environmental controls, this time flooding several corridors with harmless but terrifying holographic projections, images of massive space battles, exploding ships, and human warriors advancing through smoke and fire. The psychological impact on the security teams was immediate and devastating. Impossible, someone screamed over the communication channels. There are hundreds of humans. They've taken over the entire station. Maintain discipline, roared back. Those are just holographic projections. But fear was a contagious emotion, especially among beings who had never faced human military doctrine. The security teams began falling back despite their numerical advantage, their morale shattered by an enemy they couldn't locate, couldn't understand, and couldn't effectively engage. Sarah said, nodding the retreating security forces on her displays, "It's time for the next phase. I need you to do something that's going to seem completely insane." "I am beginning to understand that insanity is a human tactical advantage," replied dryly. "What do you require?" Sarah stood and moved to the security hub's main access door, beginning to enter the unlock sequence. "I want you to walk out there and surrender to the next security team you encounter." His 4 arms went rigid with shock. "Surrender after everything we've accomplished." "Trust me," Sarah said, meeting the Hive Queen's compound gaze. "I need you in his presence, and he'll only meet with prisoners he believes are secured. This is part of the plan. The bioengineered warrior studied Sarah's expression for a long moment, her tactical programming analyzing the request for hidden meanings or deceptions. Finally, she nodded slowly. You have proven your strategic competence. I will follow your orders, even when they appear to contradict logic. Before you go, Sarah said, pulling a small device from the security console, take this. It's a communication transponder disguised as a medical monitor. When I activate it, you'll receive detailed instructions. Accepted the device and attached it to her chitinous hide, where it would appear to be monitoring her vital signs for prison security purposes. Remember, Sarah continued, you're a defeated gladiator who has been recaptured. Play up the psychological trauma of our escape attempt. Make them believe you've been broken by the experience. Understood, and what will you be doing while I perform this deception? Sarah's smile was almost predatory. I'm going to have a private conversation with every human slave on this station. By the time realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. Departed through the main entrance, moving with the dejected posture of a defeated warrior. Sarah watched through the security cameras as the Hive Queen was quickly surrounded and taken into custody by a relieved security team. Perfect. Now for the more delicate phase of her operation. Sarah activated the internal communication system, this time focusing on the slave quarters and work areas throughout the station. Her message was broadcast on frequencies that only human-made devices could receive, a fail-safe communication protocol that had been built into Earth technology since the early days of space exploration. This is Commander Sarah, she began, speaking in English rather than relying on the station's translation systems. I know many of you have probably given up hope of rescue or escape. I'm here to tell you that hope was justified. We're going home. In the slave quarters, dozens of human prisoners looked up from their despair as their hidden communication devices activated for the first time in months or years. A young woman captured from a medical supply ship began to cry as she heard her native language spoken with authority and confidence. In approximately 20 minutes, this station's security forces will be completely neutralized, Sarah continued. When that happens, you will receive specific instructions for liberation operations. Until then, I need you to prepare quietly for immediate evacuation. She paused to let her words sink in, knowing that most of these people had probably assumed they would die in captivity. I know this seems impossible. You've seen what passes for strength in this part of the galaxy, and you've been told that humans are weak, primitive, easily defeated. Those beliefs are about to be dramatically corrected. Through the security cameras, Sarah could see human slaves throughout the station beginning to move with purpose rather than despair. Some were quietly sabotaging their work assignments. Others were preparing makeshift weapons from available materials. All of them were doing something they hadn't done in years, planning for freedom. To those of you who have been forced to work on critical station systems, Sarah added, I need you to prepare for coordinated action on my signal. Engineering personnel should be ready to override power distribution. Medical staff should prepare for mass casualty treatment, not for humans, but for aliens who are about to learn what happens when they underestimate us. The response was immediate and electric. Human slaves who had been broken and demoralized hours earlier were suddenly thinking like the engineers, doctors, soldiers, and scientists they had been before their capture. They began to remember their training, their skills, their reasons for believing that humanity deserved a place among the stars. Remember who you are, Sarah concluded. Remember what species built ships capable of crossing interstellar space in less than 2 centuries. Remember what species has never met a problem it couldn't eventually solve through determination and ingenuity. Remember that you are humans and humans do not surrender. She ended the broadcast and returned her attention to the main security displays. Had been brought before Warlord in his private command center, exactly as planned. The draconian crime lord was apparently conducting a personal interrogation, trying to understand how 2 individuals had nearly taken control of his entire operation. Sarah activated the hidden transponder and began transmitting detailed instructions too. The Hive Queen showed no outward reaction, but subtle changes in her posture indicated that she was receiving and understanding the new orders. Phase 3 was about to begin, and it would be the most audacious part of Sarah's entire plan. She was going to do something that every military manual said was impossible. She was going to win a strategic victory through pure psychological warfare, without firing a single shot or causing a single casualty. The galaxy was about to discover that humans had been holding back during their expansion into space. They were about to learn what humanity was truly capable of when survival was at stake and all restraints were removed. And Warlord, sitting comfortably in his command center while interrogating what he believed to be a broken and defeated opponent, was about to become the first alien leader to understand why conquering humanity had never been seriously considered by any intelligent species. The revolution was about to reach its conclusion, and the results would reshape how every warlord paced around the secured interrogation chamber, his massive draconian form casting shifting shadows on the walls as he studied his captured prize. Sat motionless in the center of the room, her forearms secured with neural-dampening shackles that supposedly prevented any possibility of violence or escape. "Tell me how the human did it," demanded, his yellow eyes burning with frustrated rage. "My security systems are impregnable. My personnel are trained and experienced. How did one female overcome everything I've built?" Raised her compound eyes slowly, her voice carrying the hollow tone of a defeated warrior. "She thinks differently. She sees connections where others see only chaos." "Elaborate," snarled, leaning closer to the Hive Queen. "She told me that humans don't fight the enemy they see," replied carefully, following the script Sarah had transmitted to her. "They fight the systems that create and support the enemy they see." Features twisted with confusion. "Systems? What systems?" "Your reputation," said softly. "Your authority. Your belief that strength comes from size and numbers. She's not just fighting your security forces, she's fighting the idea of warlord." The words hit home with devastating accuracy. His entire criminal empire was built on the belief that he was untouchable, unstoppable, too powerful for any individual or small group to challenge. Sarah's actions had shattered that belief not just among his enemies, but among his own forces. In the security hub, Sarah monitored the conversation while executing the final phase of her plan. Throughout station, human slaves were receiving their activation codes, specific instructions for coordinated action that would demonstrate humanity's true capabilities to every alien witness. "Attention all Liberation personnel," she broadcast on the secure human frequencies. "Operation Exodus is now active. Begin Phase 1 implementation immediately." The response was swift and devastating in its elegance. In the engineering sections, human slaves who had been forced to maintain the station's systems began implementing pre-planned modifications. Power distribution networks were rerouted. Life support systems were recalibrated. Transportation corridors were sealed or opened according to carefully calculated patterns. But the most dramatic changes were happening in the arena itself. Human slaves working in the facility's lower levels had spent weeks secretly preparing for this moment, following plans that Sarah had transmitted during her months of observation and preparation. The massive holographic projectors that provided entertainment for arena spectators flickered to life, but instead of displaying betting odds or fighter statistics, they began showing images from Earth. Rolling green hills under blue skies, cities where humans and aliens worked together in peaceful cooperation. Children playing in parks while their parents watched with contentment rather than fear. "What is this?" demanded one of the alien spectators who had remained to watch the developing crisis. "This is what humans call hope," replied Dr. Elizabeth, Sarah's younger sister, who had been captured 6 months earlier during a medical mission to the outer colonies. She had been forced to work in the arena's medical facilities, treating injured fighters and maintaining the bioengineered creatures used for entertainment. Elizabeth stepped onto the arena floor, no longer wearing the gray coveralls of a slave, but the blue uniform of the Earth Medical Corps that she had hidden for months against this moment. Behind her, dozens of other human slaves emerged from concealment points throughout the facility. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's sound system. 6 months ago, I was captured while providing humanitarian aid to refugee colonies in the sector. Like my sister, I am a representative of the United Earth Space Force, and like my sister, I have been planning for this day since the moment I arrived. The revelation sent shockwaves through the remaining alien spectators. The humans hadn't just been random victims. They had been intelligence assets, carefully documenting everything they observed and preparing for coordinated action when the opportunity arose. In his interrogation chamber, spun to face his communication console as emergency reports flooded in from throughout the station. Impossible! The humans are everywhere. They're taking over critical systems faster than we can respond. Not taking over, corrected quietly. Revealing. They were always in control of those systems. You just didn't realize it because you assumed slaves would remain slaves. The truth was even more devastating than could have imagined. For months, human prisoners throughout his organization had been secretly coordinating through hidden communication networks, sharing intelligence, and preparing for exactly this scenario. They had turned their forced labor into reconnaissance missions, their captivity into an opportunity for deep infiltration. Sarah's voice echoed through the station one final time, but now it was joined by dozens of other human voices as the liberation forces revealed themselves in perfect coordination. "Citizens of the galaxy," the collective human voice announced, "what you are witnessing is not an escape attempt or a terrorist action. This is a demonstration of what happens when any species attempts to enslave, torture, or murder human beings." Throughout the station, alien security forces found themselves facing opponents who knew their routines, their weaknesses, and their systems better than they knew them themselves. Human slaves who had been dismissed as broken and defeated revealed training in military tactics, engineering, medicine, and strategic planning. "We are scientists and explorers," the human voices continued, "but we are also the descendants of a species that survived ice ages, plagues, global wars, and the dangers of space exploration. We carry within us the accumulated knowledge of every human who ever refused to surrender in the face of impossible odds." In the arena, Elizabeth activated a device that had been hidden in the medical equipment for months. Suddenly, every human slave on the station was equipped with advanced communication gear, coordination software, and tactical information that transformed them from individual victims into a coordinated military unit. "This is why slavery is never profitable when applied to humans," Elizabeth explained to the stunned alien spectators. "We never stop learning, never stop planning, and never stop believing that we can overcome any challenge through determination and cooperation." Warlord made one final desperate attempt to regain control, activating his personal guard units and ordering them to execute all human prisoners immediately. But his orders never reached their targets. The communication systems he relied on were now under human control, and his commands were simply redirected into empty space. "Your empire is finished," informed him, her voice no longer hollow, but filled with the satisfaction of a warrior who had found worthy allies. "Not because humans are stronger than you, but because they are smarter than you. They turned your own success against you." The final blow came when Sarah's voice returned to the station communication system, this time speaking directly to himself. "Warlord," she said, her tone carrying the absolute authority of someone who held all the advantages, "you have 10 minutes to surrender unconditionally and transfer control of this facility to human authority. If you refuse, we will demonstrate why the Terran Space Force has never lost a strategic engagement against alien opponents." His response was a roar of pure rage, but his fury was meaningless now. Throughout the station, his security forces were surrendering to human prisoners who had revealed themselves to be trained military personnel. His command structure had collapsed as human infiltrators activated pre-placed systems throughout his operation. "How," he demanded, speaking to the empty air, "how did you know? How did you plan for this?" Sarah's answer came through the speakers with the calm confidence of someone explaining a simple technical procedure. "We've been preparing for this scenario since the first human ship left the solar system," she replied. "Every exploration vessel carries protocols for exactly this situation. Every human in space knows what to do if captured by hostile forces. We don't hope for rescue, we plan for victory." The demonstration was complete. In less than 4 hours, fewer than 50 human prisoners had seized control of a major criminal installation, neutralized thousands of opponents without causing significant casualties, and proven beyond doubt that humanity possessed strategic capabilities far beyond what any alien species had suspected. But the most important audience for this demonstration wasn't the aliens on station. Through hidden communication networks, the human liberation had been broadcast live to every major alien government in the galaxy. Millions of beings had watched humans transform from victims into victors through nothing more than intelligence, determination, and coordinated action. 3 days later, Sarah stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching through the main as station was systematically dismantled by Earth Force engineering teams. Every human slave had been freed and returned to Earth-controlled space. Every piece of useful technology had been confiscated for study. Every alien criminal who had participated in human trafficking had been transported to Earth for trial under Terran law. "Status report," she requested from her first officer, Tom Martinez, who had survived the initial pirate attack and spent 3 months planning his own infiltration operations before the liberation. "All human personnel accounted for and recovering," Martinez replied. "The alien governments have been remarkably cooperative about extraditing criminals and compensating victims. Apparently, our little demonstration convinced them that human patience has its limits." Sarah nodded, unsurprised by the political response. The galaxy's major powers had learned an important lesson about the difference between human peaceful intentions and human capabilities. They had discovered that humanity's relatively peaceful expansion into space wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of restraint. "And," Sarah asked. "She's requested asylum on Earth," Martinez reported. "Apparently, she wants to study human military doctrine and contribute to our strategic planning efforts." Sarah smiled, remembering the bioengineered warrior who had chosen honor over survival, cooperation over conflict. "Approved. She's earned her place among us." As the Retribution turned toward home, Sarah reflected on the events that had brought her to this moment. The galaxy had expected to see a beast in the arena, a primitive human female overwhelmed by superior alien strength and technology. Instead, they had encountered something far more dangerous. A woman with fire in her eyes and the absolute conviction that humans belonged among the stars, no matter what obstacles stood in their way. The age of human expansion had truly begun, and the galaxy would never again make the mistake of underestimating the species that had turned a criminal empire's greatest stronghold into humanity's most effective demonstration of why enslaving humans was always a fatal error in judgment. In the end, they had expected a beast and received a revelation about what it meant to be human in a universe that respected only strength. And humanity, as always, had proven that true strength came not from size or numbers, but from the refusal to accept defeat regardless of the odds. The galaxy had learned to fear the fire in human eyes, and that fear would serve as humanity's greatest protection as they continued their journey toward the star's alien civilization, viewed the dangerous, unpredictable species that had emerged from the small blue world called Earth. The revolution had begun, and the galaxy was about to discover that humans were far more dangerous as enemies than they had ever been as entertainment. "We take the station," she replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "All of it." This was about to become a demonstration of exactly why humans had earned their place among the stars, and why underestimating them was always a fatal mistake.